Remain standing, please, for prayers by Reverend Canon Andy Thompson. Thank you.
I'm going to begin by reading from the Hebrew Bible from the book Proverbs. Proverbs was written as a preparation guide for those going into political government. And at the heart of Proverbs is the recognition that all people involved in political affairs should seek wisdom. And this is what Proverbs chapter 8 says. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate leading into the city at the entrance, she cries aloud, "To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain wisdom. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy thing to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true, for my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just, none of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than gold, for wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, in governance, we lift our council leaders before your throne, seeking your divine wisdom and discernment to illuminate their path. As they navigate the complexities of decision-making that impact the lives of the local community, grant them clarity of thought and vision. May your guiding hand lead them toward decisions rooted in integrity, compassion, and the common good. Amid the cacophony of voices and competing interests, may they attune their ears to your still, small voice of wisdom, finding solace and direction in your unfailing counsel. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Could you remain standing, please, for a minute's silence, please? Minute silence for Fode Jan-Juicy, former Labour lead on External Services Select Committee, Anthony Way, former leader of the Labour Group, and Paul Harmsworth, leader Chief Whip, who sadly passed away. Please be seated. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. I have apologies from councillors Bennett, Rita Chamdal, Garg, Gill, Lachmana and Lewis.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes. To receive the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 22nd of February and 9th of May 2024. All agreed? Thank you. Are there any declarations? Item 3, sorry. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 4, Mayor's announcements. Good evening. Here's a brief synopsis of the events, civic services and community events I've had the privilege to attend. I hit the ground running with visits to various care homes, celebrating a resident's 100th birthday to open day celebrations. I attended a civic service and 60th anniversary at the Ark Synagogue, which was a wonderful occasion. Thank you to Councillor Riley for your help with security. The Mayor's Parlour is ever popular with schools, volunteers and other organisations, and there are more parlour visits planned. I have attended many school fetes, local festivals, AGMs, Expo 24 and relicensing and coalition of local vicars, and I've met with many volunteer groups, too many to mention. I have a few highlights I'd like to share with you. I was invited to open a pond at St Andrew's School. The PTA had recreated a pond so that children and teachers could learn from nature. When I approached the school gates, all you could see and hear were children screaming and waving. When I reached the children fully robed, the screaming reached crescendo. One child asked if that was the Queen. We've never had a Queen calling, but there is always a first. The pond was surrounded with pebbles decorated by the children. The pond and its surroundings reflected tranquility at its best. Nature has its way of showing us the beauty of every moment. What a wonderful afternoon. My love of music and arts was pandered to with various theatre visits, SIN nominee singers, Hillingdon Philharmonic Orchestra, and a celebration of music at Cadogan Hall, where young musicians of our community showcased their remarkable talents. The young musicians were not only playing notes, they were weaving stories, expressing emotions, and creating memories that will last a lifetime. It was a magical evening. I was invited to record In Conversation with Radio Hillingdon based on Desert Island Discs. In Conversation covered every aspect of the mayoral role, the robes, the chain of office, the mace, and 6 of my favorite songs and the reasons for my choice, and of course a little bit about myself. It was a wonderful experience and a lovely way to spend an afternoon. I was honored to lay a wreath on behalf of the Polish Airmen's Association at St. Paul's Cathedral on D-Day, and on D-Day, 6th of June, I had the honor to lay a wreath at the Battle of Britain Bunker. On Sunday, 7th of July, at the Cherry Lane Cemetery, I was there with many others to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the tragedy at the EMI building in Hayes. A bomb fell near the entrance of the surface shelter, and those caught in the open were either killed or injured. 37 employees were killed, and of the 37, 21 were women. We came together after 80 years to remember those who paid the ultimate price for our freedom. 2-minute silence was observed. A lone piper played the bagpipe lament, and we remembered them. Armed Forces Day was celebrated with the raising of flag on the Civic Centre forecourt. Last but by no means least, the Mayor's picnic in the park was a wonderful day. The weather was perfect, the entertainers were fantastic, so many sideshows and other stalls, too many to mention, except to say what a wonderful way to spend a Saturday afternoon in such pleasant surroundings and enjoying the Mayor's picnic in the park. What's not to like? It was indeed a delight to see so many happy faces, and that was just the mums and dads. The children, as usual, take it in their stride. In the twinkling of a child's smile, we find the simplicity of pure joy. My thanks to councillors on both sides of the chamber who were there supporting the event. My special thanks to Councillor Becky Hagger and her face painting team, who created some beautiful artwork. I did, however, manage to dodge Becky's helpers, who were keen to paint my face. And a special thanks to Councillor Jonathan Bianco for his support and for acting as my cameraman. My thanks, appreciation and congratulations to Cheryl, Anne, Nikki, Andy and Chris for all their hard work in helping to make the Mayor's picnic in the park such a resounding success. And a special thank you to the stewards who did a stonking job. I'd like to leave you with a thought. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. Never give up on the things that make you smile. Thank you. Item 5, questions from the public. Question from Mark Morgan.
At the full council meeting on the 30th of November 2023, in response to our question about the recruitment of the new woodland officer, the previous one was retiring in December 2023, we were told and recorded in the minutes it states, quote, "The recruitment process was currently underway," unquote. As of the 27th of June 2024, no replacement has been appointed, so please would the Cabinet member advise when we can expect a new woodland officer to be in post and whether this will be a full-time position.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Mark Morgan for the question. The work of the Community Woodland Officer is currently being covered by other members of Green Spaces and has been since he retired at the end of December 2023. At the time he retired, he was only working part-time hours anyway, and the service has been satisfactorily covering the work. The post is currently subject to review, and I'm therefore not in a position to confirm whether there will be an exact replacement or whether other members of the team will continue to carry out this necessary work. Thank you.
A question from Anna Punja, please.
Thank you. I'm also with the Rice Woods Trust. To Councillor Lavery as well. According to the National Nature Reserve Management Standards set by Natural England, there is a statutory duty to have a management plan that must be kept up to date and reviewed every 5 years for the woods. The current plan for the Rice Woods expired 3 years ago, and therefore the Council is not complying with their statutory duty. So please, would the Cabinet member disclose the plans to update the plan, consult and publish it, and within what timescales we expect these to be completed, please?
Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Anand Pudja for your question. The Rice Woods Complex has a management plan which was written and adopted in 1982, which was a 100-year vision for the management of this site. This vision has continued to be applied to the site. The 5-year review is a substantial piece of work, and being due in 2021 was delayed by the COVID period. As I'm sure people will remember, we as an authority took as a priority to keep our green spaces open, unlike many others who decided to shut them and curtail activities, which meant that this piece of work was pushed back. The piece of work is in final stages of drafting and therefore should be available for publication shortly.
Question from Robert.
Thank you. Could the Council please explain how it monitors the health and safety of unlicensed HMOs and how the planning process ensures that our basic infrastructure is not affected by the change of use of houses, particularly in our area?
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your question. As with most local authorities, we have no accurate estimate of unlicensed HMOs in the borough. Council depends on community intelligence to inform us when they suspect that the property is operating as an unlicensed HMO. Identifying and accessing these premises can prove difficult, particularly as it is frequently the case that tenants are unwilling to talk to the council. To take enforcement action, the Council does need to have evidence that the property is a licensable HMO. Once an unlicensed HMO is confirmed and identified through investigation, enforcement action is instigated. For clarity, a licence is required if the following criteria are met. The property is rented to 5 or more people who form more than one household. Some or all of the tenants share toilet, bathroom or kitchen facilities, and at least one tenant pays rent. The licensing regime is primarily concerned with the internal standards of the property. In terms of the planning system, an HMO can be split into separate bedsits for shared accommodation. It is important to note the property does not need to be converted or adapted in any way to be classified as an HMO, providing property owners a degree of flexibility. There are 2 different types depending on size. A small HMO exists for between 3 and 6 unrelated people, and in most of the council's area this is permitted development and does not require planning permission. The exemption is an area in and around Brunel University which was drawn based on former council wards. Larger HMOs, i.e. properties occupied by 6 or more unrelated individuals, do require planning permission and are assessed against policy DMH5, houses in multiple occupation and student occupation. This requires proposals for large HMOs to demonstrate good accessibility to local amenities and transport, and they're called accessible home standards, and ensuring there's no adverse impact on amenities. For the area around Brunel where the permitted development rights have been removed, there are some additional tests to ensure that the number of HMOs remains within limit. The Council will take enforcement action where this can be evidenced, and I therefore would encourage residents, if they do have evidence of this, to report this to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Question by Nikki Carava, please.
ULEZ vandals continue to act with impunity in Hillingdon. They destroy traffic and pedestrian lights and gleefully post footage online. Their actions, as we all know, are shocking and degrading to the borough. The results endanger pedestrians. At 3 sites in Hillingdon, these have included children, school children, near Viners High School, Whitehall Primary and Park Academy. I have video footage of school children struggling to cross busy roads where the pedestrian lights have been destroyed. It is time to work together to stop the vandalism.
Yes, this one here.
Would the Council please consider the formation of a cross-party coalition of councillors of the Cabinet, the MP and the police? This could be a group or a subcommittee, but importantly, it would be regardless of one's position on the ULEZ scheme itself. We should send the message loud and clear to stop and help the police bring the perpetrators to justice. It is to support the rule of law in our peaceful borough. Please join together to stop the vandalism.
Councillor Lavery? Oh, I thought it was Bianca. Lavery. Sorry, beg your pardon. I thought he said
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Crowther, for your question. Hillingdon Council shares your concerns about the damage that has been caused to vital highway equipment by people opposed to the ULEZ charge. Whilst it is public knowledge that we were opposed to the introduction of this charge, we do not condone the actions of those who commit criminal damage to ULEZ equipment without any consideration for the safety risks and disruption that results from their actions. However, let me be clear. All traffic signals across not only Hillingdon but across the whole of London are entirely owned, operated and maintained by Transport for London, on behalf of the Mayor of London. As a result, Hillingdon owns none of them. Therefore, whenever we are made aware of these incidents, we must work with Transport for London and our police colleagues, sharing information, including images from our public space CCTV system, to support any police investigation into these crimes and to mitigate the impacts. As you may know, the Council operates an extensive public space CCTV network, which is monitored on a 24-hour, 7 days a week basis. This system provides vital evidence to support police investigations of crime in the borough and to assist in the rapid response to crimes when they occur. Many of our main road junctions are covered by this CCTV network. However, despite this, the Council is unable to protect all the highway infrastructure equipment from people who are determined to damage said equipment. The Safer Hillingdon Partnership is a multi-agency group formed for the purpose of bringing organisations together to monitor crime and disorder in the borough and to develop plans to respond to those crimes. It is chaired by my colleague, the Cabinet Member for Resident Services, Councillor Lavery. Therefore, there is already an appropriate forum to bring relevant partners together to provide oversight of this problem and to support the police in its response to it. Thank you.
Question submitted by Nicola, please.
Please could residents have a full explanation why the vehicle pound that was built last year costing £49,000 is still not operational? I've been told by planning that it is not a planning issue. The revenue generated from the vehicle pound was meant to help pay towards marshals and a tow truck to operate in the Ruislip-Lido area during the summer months. Currently, residents are paying the costs through their council tax. Thank you.
Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Nicola Dake for your question. The car pound was planned to enable the council to relocate vehicles parked illegally at Ruislip-Lido and to charge the owner for the vehicle's return. It will not be operational this summer. It was identified during the build of the proposed storage compound there were design issues that have necessitated a further review of the suitability of this location. Civil enforcement officers are deployed each day to enforce parking restrictions near to Ruislip-Lido. At weekends, when visitor numbers are expected to be high, additional civil enforcement officers are deployed to the area along with a tow truck. Vehicles that are towed are relocated to Green Lane car park in Northwood. It was not intended that any revenue from the vehicles removed to the planned car pound would pay for car park marshals. Rules regarding the use of receipts from parking penalties would prevent this. Any receipts would have been used to offset the costs of parking enforcement for this area. Car park marshals are deployed over weekends when visitor numbers are expected to be higher than normal day. Thank you.
Item 6, report from the Head of Democratic Services. Yeah. Councillor Edwards.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Please allow me to go slightly off the agenda for a second, because it would be churlish of me not to recognise the general election result and the success of the Labour Party in forming our new government, and also to recognise and congratulate Danny Beals on his election as a Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. And whilst I'm congratulating people, I'd also like to congratulate, hopefully on behalf of everybody here, the England team for reaching the final, and hope we will all be there cheering them on Sunday evening. I do wish to extend my commiserations to Councillor Tutwell, who was a victim of widespread rejection of the Conservative Party by the electorate, and there was no reflection on him or his commitment to and achievements for the residents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. The experience of the count of the evening has led me to ask the Head of Democratic Services to review the processes and procedures of our count, and he will be bringing a report to Council in September on this matter. Now returning to the agenda items, item 6, the Head of Democratic Services, is in 6 parts. The first part is to note the 15 urgent decisions that have been taken by Cabinet or Cabinet members since the end of January this year. Where possible, I have taken urgent agenda items at Cabinet to improve transparency, but occasions remain when decisions have to be made more speedily than the calendar of meetings allows. I ask that this be noted, the 15 urgent items. Part 2, Section 2, seeks Council agreement to the appointment of the Chair of our Health and Social Care Select Committee to the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, led by Hertfordshire, and who is examining the proposal for future cancer care in the sub-region. I hope that Council will agree that appointment. Item 3 seeks Council approval to amend Chapter 4 of the licensing decisions of Council Constitution consequent to changes in the law relating to pavement licences. The change in the law intends to bring about a quick, cheaper and easier process for the issuing of said licences. The proposal is to delegate authority to grant licences to the Corporate Director of Place. Item 4 is to agree amendment to the terms of reference of the Corporate Resources and Infrastructure Select Committee to incorporate responsibility for oversight of complaints to the Council. This will ensure our compliance with new directions issued by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman and the Housing Ombudsman and revised Complaints Handling Code. Item 5 seeks Council agreement to the revised Local Development Scheme, which is a project plan for the production of the new local plan and other planning documents. Item 6 seeks Council agreement to propose changes to the contract and procurement standing orders, the Cabinet scheme of delegations, and the responsibility and delegations to officers. It is imperative that to the greatest extent possible, the expertise within our procurement team is freed from the administration of our more than 2,000 contracts to concentrate on strategic commissioning and to focus on our larger contracts in order to reduce supplier cost to the Council. These changes are necessary to secure that outcome. Specifically, they incorporate technical changes required by law and the recommendations of the Select Committee review into procurement. They modernise processes, making best use of IT solutions, they reduce bureaucracy, and they clarify obligations and responsibilities. Appendix A describes the changes, and the amended Chapter 18 rules on procurement is included, showing in red the changes and deletions. I wish to correct an error in Appendix A, paragraph SO4, minimum tendering requirements. The last line of the first bullet point, 4.1a, should read 3, not 5. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I move those 6 recommendations.
Is that seconded by Councillor Bianchi?
And I second those 6 recommendations and reserve my right to speak last should it be necessary.
Are there any other speakers? Is that agreed? Yeah. Okay, fine. Item 7, members' questions. First question, Councillor Bridges, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member for Finance please explain the role which the Counter Fraud team is playing in respect of social housing in the borough?
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you also to Councillor Bridges for your question. Housing fraud is without doubt one of the largest areas of fraud exposure for this authority. Not only does it cause financial loss to this council, but more particularly, it deprives deserving and needy families of the appropriate accommodation to which they are entitled. We therefore followed a policy of increased investment into counter-fraud. This has enabled the full engagement of our award-winning counter-fraud team in housing, pursuing preventative, investigative measures to act as a deterrent, strengthen controls, and identify and eliminate current fraudulent activity. This work has encompassed application, tenancy, and homelessness fraud, and the contribution made by the counter-fraud team to date has been spectacularly successful. In the financial year 22-23, the team achieved housing savings equating to £5.6 million and included the recovery of 84 council properties and the closure of 24 emergency B&B accommodations. In 23-24, these savings rose to £6.1 million, with a recovery of 103 council properties and the closure of 42 emergency accommodations. Already in the current financial year, in the first quarter, savings of £2.2 million have been achieved, 30 council properties recovered, and 7 emergency accommodations closed. Madam Mayor, it therefore is a subject of some surprise and disappointment to me to hear that an opposition member of this council has chosen to express condemnation of the fact that counter-fraud plays an active role in housing. Madam Mayor, this administration's investment made into counter-fraud has generated a highly valuable return for the authority and for residents in particular. I'm currently evaluating options to increase that investment further, and I'm sure that all members of this chamber will want to join with me in applauding the outstanding achievements of the counter-fraud team in housing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bridges, have you got a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Question submitted by Councillor Sweeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to Councillor Bianco, Deputy Leader of the Council. The West Drayton Station approach is still closed to buses due to the road surface collapsing over the sunken sewer. And although local councillors and residents have been lobbying both the council and Network Rail Infrastructure Limited for years for this repair to be undertaken, on the 18th of January this year, it was reported to this chamber that the work had a potential completion date of July 2024. However, this date has now slipped, and I have been advised by way of a member's inquiry that we now have an aspiration for the repair from Network Rail set at December 2024, with the word hope used to describe this completion date. Given past assurances by Network Rail over this issue, which have been repeatedly broken, what is the Council doing to turn hope into reality, seeing it is now some 25 months from the 11th of June 2022 since buses have been able to drop off and pick up residents and travellers alike from trains from the line named after our late Queen?
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sweeting. Your question, of course, is on a topic where I know we share the frustration felt jointly by all of us as members and that of many of our residents. As you know, and as you've commented, we've been pressing Network Rail, who own Station Approach, let's be clear about that, for a proper, acceptable resolution to this matter for many months, and have received over that period promises and timetables that have not been adhered to. You will know that more recently, following my letter to the Chief Executive of Network Rail, a high-level meeting was held on site at the end of April, with Network Rail senior directors who were summoned to hear first-hand the frustration from the Council, its residents and the wider travelling public, and to secure from the company a firm and realistic programme to undertake their works. To add impetus and gravitas to the site discussion, the meeting was attended by the leader, the local MP and the Transport Minister, and it actually took place on the part of the station forecourt that the Council's contractors had already completed, using funding from the Elizabeth Line project. The contrast between what had been achieved, and by whom, and what had yet to be delivered was starkly obvious to all present. Following this meeting, we have received further assurances by Network Rail that they will start on site in August with repairs to the sewer, followed in October, following the repairs to the sewer, by works to the surface water drainage, and in November with the resurfacing of the roadway. Their aim is to complete all of this work by the end of November, at which point they assure us that the site will be clear and safe to allow the readmission of buses into Station Approach during early December. You may rest assured that officers and members will keep this programme under close supervision to ensure that it is delivered as promised. and if it isn't, we will be on their case immediately. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeting, have you got a supplementary question?
Yes, I have. Thank you very much for those assurances. However, as this problem dates way back to January 2020, and seeing this council did not take up my recommendation last year to submit a formal complaint to the independent regulator, the Office of Rail and Road, over the failure of Network Rail to comply with its obligations under the West Drayton Station lease as specified in the National Station Access Conditions, Condition D.4. Will the Council now make a formal complaint to Andrew Haynes, Network Rail CEO, the Office of Rail and Road, and the new Rail Minister, Lord Hendy, in order to ensure that this new promised timescale does not slip, as all of the others have slipped over the 4.5 long years, as this issue has been going on for far too long and has caused our residents considerable hardship? Thank you.
Councillor Bianco.
Madam Mayor and Councillor Sweeting, whilst I share your great concern and desire to see this project through, that isn't an assurance I can give you at this time. However, I do believe we have finally, with the meeting that was held at senior level, got the message across that this needs to be addressed. We will be watching very closely to see that it starts, and if it fails to start, we will take action.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah. Could the Cabinet Member for Finance please provide an update of the position of external audits on the Council's published financial statements for the financial years ending the 31st of March 2023 and the 31st of March 2024?
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Dennis for your question. As I'm sure all members will be aware, it's mandatory for the year-end financial statements of local authorities to be subject to a full scope and independent audit. However, the accounting profession, excuse me, and here I'm referring to the 7 or 8 largest audit firms in England and Wales, are in a state of turmoil at a national level with their workload of public sector audits. According to the latest published statistics of the local authorities in England and Wales, 69% of them have yet to receive an audit opinion for their 22-23 accounts, notwithstanding the fact that the deadline for achieving this was the 30th of September 2023. Furthermore, 40% of them have yet to receive an opinion for 21-22, 17% haven't had an opinion for 2021, 6% nothing for 2019-20, and 2%, amazingly, not having received something for 2018-19. The audit firms justify this position by citing the increasing complexity in local authority financial statements. My own opinion, which is shared by many, is that the comparatively modest financial returns made by the firms in the public sector auditing process have brought about a serious under-resourcing in their teams, notwithstanding the fact that substantial fee increases have already been sustained by the vast majority of councils. Discussions between the audit firms, national government, and the various regulatory bodies have arrived at what I can only describe excuse me, as a proposed crude fix, which entails abandoning all hitherto uncompleted audits for the 22-23 financial year and concentrating effort on completing the following 23-24 year in comparatively good time. However, it must be recognised that these deliberations were not finalised prior to the general election, and so there's some uncertainty as to whether these proposals will be finalised in their current form. Were they to be finalised, this would inevitably lead to what would effectively amount to disclaimed audit opinions for 22-23 and will, in all probability, impose limitations on the forms of opinion which councils can expect to receive for 23-24. Unlike many authorities, Hillingdon has received full, clean audit opinions on all financial statements up to and including 21-22. Our draft financial statements for 22-23 have been published, and we have been and continue to be in a state of complete readiness to undergo an audit. However, this has not happened, and we cannot have any realistic expectation that it will take place. All that has taken place for 22-23 is that our value for money statement and our pension fund have been subjected to full audit scope procedures. Our 23-24 draft financial statements have also been published, and our auditors have already commenced their work. An agreed objective between the auditors and ourselves is that the 23-24 audit will be completed and signed off by the 30th of November next. Madam Mayor, my major concern here is that this authority should not suffer reputational damage as a result of what is clearly a national issue rather than a local one. And for that reason, I am in close discussions with our finance officers and our auditors in order to agree as smooth a transition as is possible through the publication of the finalised 22-23 and 23-24 financial statements. Of course, if there are further materials developments in this matter, I will bring these to the attention of members as soon as that information is to hand. Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Denny, have you got a supplementary question?
No, there isn't, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Question submitted by Councillor Curling, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the past few months, there has been an increase in criminal damage to traffic signals, which has caused serious accidents and congestion. This vandalism poses a number of hazards to members of the public, such as obstacles for the vision impaired, elderly and disabled to navigate, sawn metal and exposed cables in the traffic signal columns, as well as heightened risks of accidents and personal injury to both drivers and pedestrians. Will the Leader of the Council join me in condemning these criminal activities and of damaging and sawing down traffic signals, or does he agree with this criminal activity?
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Curling, for your question. Of course, it would not surprise you that having given 31 years of my life to uphold the law, that I would in any way condone criminal activity, whether that is chucking statues into docks, whether it is daubing orange paint onto works of art or buildings of heritage value, whether it is gluing yourself to the highways, causing obstruction, or destroying ULEZ cameras and traffic lights. I have not only no reservation and hesitation in condemning that activity, I would also call forward on everybody that can give any information that would result in the identification of those perpetrators to do so. These offenders must be brought to justice. Thank you.
Have you a supplementary question, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Does the Leader of the Council also condemn the social media and political rhetoric that can be seen as to add a tacit approval to these criminal and hazardous behaviour?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In my answer to this question, I do not wish to diminish the public concern that is being expressed by the question this evening from a resident. It is the Council's property that is also damaged. It is our cameras that enforce the safety outside our schools, and there is, of course, the resultant risk to public life. But the implication of the supplementary question is that this extensive damage is being caused by a social media site, and that is not the case. The extent of the damage being caused across London, I cannot ascertain. Transport for London will not disclose to us the amount of damage being occurred in our borough, which thwarts our ability to work in partnership to identify the offenders and bring them to justice. Since the Mayor's ending of borough-based policing, the Metropolitan Police are no longer able to provide us data about the extent of damage in this borough. The question was asked over a week ago. We have still had no reply, and we are actually told that the police are having difficulty in identifying that number themselves, as these are not specifically identifiable or flagged in a way that aids their identification. The only information I can get is that 6 months ago, the Metropolitan Police Service reported that that about 1,000 cameras had been damaged or stolen in the previous 6 months. That number has probably comfortably doubled by now. But for me, the extent of the social disorder around this matter is the astounding number of unpaid fixed penalty notices. And back in April, that stood at 810,000 unpaid fixed penalty notices. In my experience, extensive and sustained civic disobedience is driven by a wide and burning sense of social injustice. And my mind turns to the poll tax for that matter. ULEZ is unjust. It is a regressive tax. It doesn't apply to me. It probably doesn't apply to many in this chamber. We are fortunate enough to be able to have new cars, or newish cars. It doesn't apply to new gas guzzlers, the millionaire's Rolls Royce, their Range Rover, their supercars. It applies to households and businesses on low and modest incomes. It is that are reliant on well-maintained, or were reliant on well-maintained, though probably low mileage in the household terms, and frequently used cars and vans to go about their business. This £12.50 charge is a tax on those low-income households and pensioners of modest means, and a tax and undermines their savings and wealth. It is also a tax on small businesses, sole traders, and tradespersons in particular. It has forced thousands of households to spend their savings, to go further into debt, to cancel holidays, change life plans, spending plans, to replace what they understood to be perfectly serviceable and reliable car that they could use elsewhere in this country, but not in their own neighbourhood. The injustice was compounded by the implementation of the Mayor. It was unreasonably fast, less than 10 months' notice given, whereas the initial implementation, right at the beginning, some years ago, 3 years' notice was provided. There was significant misrepresentation of the facts, to the extent that the Advertising Standards Agency were critical of the Mayor. There was perceived bias in the consultation, and all this happened during the peak of the cost of living crisis. The impact of the implementation or extension of ULEZ to Outer London has been, up until March, some months back, £115 million have been taken from the pockets of Londoners. And up until February, more than £250,000 of fixed penalty notice charges have been paid by Hillingdon residents. Yes, there is criminal behaviour that needs to be condemned, to be challenged, and offenders brought to justice. But the cause of the social sense of this social injustice does not lie with a social media platform. It lies with the Mayor of London, who brought in this. But I also add that it lies with the politicians that knew in their hearts that ULEZ was wrong, but didn't have the courage to stand up against the Mayor of London. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Gohill, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please can the Cabinet Member provide an update on the current state of construction of the new Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre in West Drayton?
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gohill, for your question. As many of you will know, the original contractor for the Platinum Jubilee Leisure Centre, Buckingham's, went into administration in September 23. At the time, the Council's immediate concern was to secure the site and prevent any damage to the works already completed. And at the time, again, the decision was taken as part of that process to continue with the works and to make the building weathertight and secure, whilst reviewing and considering the options available to the council to progress and complete the building. A number of potential solutions were reviewed. Firstly, to get a new contractor to complete the works. Secondly, to get a management contractor to oversee the works. And thirdly, for the council to complete the works directly. These and other factors were considered, along with the cost, risk, delivery and completion date, and with the interest also considered was the interest of the construction market in completing works started by others, which is always an unpopular choice for contractors. And weighing up all these factors and risks involved, it was decided to continue to client manage the completion works ourselves, subject to appointing specialist consultants to oversee the management of the works and all M&E mechanical engineering complexities of the building. And this was what was agreed by Cabinet. I'm pleased to say that the weathertight works are now essentially complete, and most of the scaffolding has been stripped from the building. The brickwork has been completed, and most of the windows, if not all of them, are now installed. The roof is complete, along with all the internal walls and floor structures, and the pool structures are in place. Work is now commencing on the completion and internal fit-out stages of the build, with the mechanical and electrical engineering works now started. It is currently expected that the works will be complete in summer next year. Thank you.
Councillor Gold, have you got a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Question number 7. I will be asking the question on behalf of Councillor Rita Chandal in her absence. Could the Cabinet member confirm the benefits to the Council of the decision by our NHS colleagues to rent part of the Civic Centre? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure to answer a question directly to you on behalf of Councillor Chandal. Those of you that know me know that I like to get on my feet with a good news story, and I am about to do just that with a good news story. Adult social care and other partners of Hillingdon Health and Care Partnerships, that I will refer to as HCP, continue to work closely together to achieve a more streamlined and integrated approach to providing healthcare and support in the community for our residents. Having our NHS partners joining us in the Civic Centre is enabling us to go even further in developing our relationships and opportunities for collaboration. This arrangement means spending from the public purse once, and it is a demonstration of the strength of Hillingdon's partnership working, as very few places have overcome the complex accounting differences across the different organisations to make such a move possible. The combined priorities of Hillingdon's health and wellbeing strategy and those of HHCP mean that the move of those NHS teams to the Civic Centre will provide a single base of operations for all of those with responsibility for delivering the services that our most vulnerable residents require the most. Operationally, the excellent performance of our hospital discharge service is a great example of joint system working. I see it first hand as a representative on the Integrated Care Board with my 7 other North West London members, how highly our discharge system is recognised across North West London. The co-location of our health teams within the Civic Centre will enable integration to go one step further, again providing an even better experience to some of our most vulnerable residents. Additionally, with a rental income included, the move to the Civic Centre estate is financially beneficial to all parties, allowing the Council to make the most efficient use of our assets while providing better frontline services. I wish to personally congratulate the officers who made that possible, and the social care team, in particular Sandra Taylor, and the workers who have embraced this with professionalism, optimism and hope for the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Question by Councillor McMahon, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member please update Council on the progress of the Specialist Resource Provision and Assessment Centre at Ruislip Gardens Primary School?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor McQuarna, for the question. A truly good news story. In Hillingdon, we want to ensure that every child or young person has high access, quality education close to their home, which we have been doing successfully for very many years. And as part of this Council's ongoing commitment to creating thriving, healthy households, our school improvement and expansion programme is delivering much needed additional school places in the borough for our children with special educational needs. We have recently announced that Ruislip Gardens Primary School Specialist Resource Provision, SRP, I will use moving forwards, and Assessment Centre are both up and running. There are currently children in both the Assessment Centre and the SRP. In addition, the SRP is fully subscribed for September 2024. Officers are currently in the process of allocating places for the Assessment Centre, which is identified through referral and is a completely new type of provision for this borough. It is important for the Council to meet the demand for specialist provision, and it requires us to carefully examine how spaces at our schools are used, identifying buildings that can be adapted, expanded or repurposed. The new facilities are located across 2 floors within Ruislip Gardens Primary, and the space is benefited with newly reappointed classrooms, group therapy and sensory rooms, as well as accessible toilets, storage facilities and kitchens, and a kitchen. It is impressive to see how the spaces have come to life and children starting to benefit from what was otherwise a mothballed part of the school. The new facilities provide 32 additional school places for children with special educational needs. The school's new bespoke specialist resource provision enables 16 primary-aged school children with autistic spectrum conditions to access personalised support to meet their needs, whilst also benefiting from being part of mainstream classes, meeting our objectives to allow children the opportunity to integrate into and join in with whole school events where appropriate for all year activities or lessons that are right for them. The Assessment Centre offers a new concept within the borough, offering 16 full-time places, 32 part-time places, AM or PM, for children aged between 3 to 5 years old who have severe development delays and other complex needs. Each child will receive personal support whilst they undergo the assessment process for an educational and healthcare plan. Children have the option of remaining at the centre until they transition into reception. The developments at Ruislip Gardens Primary School supports the Council in successfully progressing key elements of the new 5-year SEND and AP strategy 2023 to 2028 and is meeting the ambitions set out within that. Both units are a much needed addition to the spectrum of provision Hillingdon offers our children and young people with SEND, and we will continue to forge ahead with other projects that form part of this overall strategy. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Have your supplementary question, Councillor?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 8, motion from Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I very much welcome the Prime Minister's promise to reset the relationship between central and local government and to put more power in the hands of local leaders. Whilst he made this commitment in anticipation of his meeting with the 12 Metro mayors this week, it is this Council's expectation that his commitments also apply to us and other unitary authorities. Councils exist primarily to serve their residents, and it is from them that we should take direction, hence our core value of putting residents first. But we are able to best serve our residents only when we engage with and influence government to shape policy and funding to enable local needs and priorities to be met. Previously, we had well-developed and, for a period, very privileged routes of access to government, but these have been substantially changed by the election of the Labour government and our new Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. New lines of communication need to be built to our new government, and I am committed to do this. Time will tell the extent to which this council is assisted by our Labour colleagues to achieve that aim. This motion sets out the priorities of this council and its residents that require us to work collaboratively with the government in order to achieve success. The securing of the full cost of care, the ending of the threat of the third runway, and the continued control of the council's ability to tax their residents are not likely to be contentious. Securing full cost recovery for the services we provide to asylum seekers as a consequence of being a port authority is, on the face of it, likely to also be supported unanimously. But historically, that cost has not been routinely met by government, requiring lengthy lobbying by our members of Parliament to recover that deficit. Our future success, our ability to safeguard our residents from having to fund an essentially national responsibility and burden, will now be more dependent on the willingness of our opposition and Labour members of Parliament to work with this administration to secure that additional funding. I am open to working with them, and they are open to working with me. On the remaining 3 points, there is a clear question of where our Labour colleagues stand. The deficit on the dedicated schools grant is a consequence of legislative change, insufficient funding, and increasing demand for specialist education provision. The opposition have repeatedly sought to cast this problem in a different light for political purposes, and it will be interesting to see the extent to which the new government recognises that this is a systemic problem that requires action by them. Will the Labour colleagues have the maturity to change their position and lobby for the retention of the ring fence in the interests of residents? The expansion of ULEZ caused the opposition and the new Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip to flip-flop between support and opposition. The Mayor's recent application of the congestion charge to vehicles previously exempt is an indicator for the future, and I believe it is inevitable that ULEZ charge will be increasingly applied to vehicles that are previously exempt or presently exempt to mitigate the forecast diminishing revenue on which the Mayor is becoming more and more reliant to pay for his extravagant spending. We have been clear and consistent on our position, but which side of the fence will our Labour colleagues sit in the future? When it comes to planning policy, there appears to be a clear divide. The Conservatives believe in local determination, in residents having a say, and our much-valued green and open spaces being protected from development. The new government is signalling a different direction, placing more power with the developers to take the easy way forward, to build on undeveloped land that will just also happen to maximise their profits. One only has to look at the unfinished development on the former RAF Uxbridge site, or the delay in starting the building of the former Master Brewer site, to understand that the problem is far more complex than is being made out. Local residents are not the primary cause of the shortage of housing, nor is it the planning authority, nor the availability of suitable brownfield sites in this borough. Will the opposition stand with us to safeguard our open spaces and to ensure that residents continue to have a say in the development in their neighbourhoods? The new Prime Minister has repeatedly pledged to put country before politics, and he will gain my respect if he delivers on that pledge. The question is whether our Labour colleagues will now follow the Prime Minister's lead and put residents before party by supporting this motion. I so move.
Is that seconded by Councillor Baker?
Madam Mayor, I second and reserve my right to speak last.
Are there any? Councillor Dennis?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The new Health Secretary described Hillingdon Hospital as a monstrosity and compared the hospital buildings to a dad's army site. I'm not sure what that is, but probably not good. But he also made a firm commitment on behalf of the Labour Party, and in his words, that a modern state-of-the-art hospital would be delivered within the first term of Labour government. It is up to all of us in here, and some of us who are not in this room, to make sure that commitment is fully upheld. If you walk around Hillingdon Hospital, you notice two things. Firstly, you're right, I wouldn't describe it as monstrosity, but it's definitely not fit for purpose and makes it hard to provide high quality healthcare. But the second thing you notice is that redevelopment is underway. You see rooms and areas that have been shut, doorways that have that luminous tape over. Now that luminous tape is a tribute to hospital staff who worked really hard to put Hillingdon Hospital at the front of the queue of hospitals that are going to get rebuilt. It's also a tribute to the council, which has accelerated the planning system to give all the planning permission that's needed to make sure that the spade can go into the ground as soon as possible. It's also a tribute to Hillingdon Healthcare Partnership for working together to make sure we deliver plans for a hospital that works with a modern healthcare strategy. But it's also, as well, a tribute to Councillor Tuckwell. For when he was an MP, he spent a lot of time behind the scenes working hard to get Hillingdon Hospital rebuilt. This involved visiting the hospital redevelopment team often, site visits, asking ministers questions all the time in Parliament, getting them to visit, getting them to promise that they would keep to the promise of rebuilding Hillingdon Hospital, and ensuring meetings happened with key stakeholders so we could make our case, show people that we're at the front of the queue, we're ready to go. Without Councillor Tuckwell, we would not be where we are now. So, I'm going to use this opportunity now to congratulate the new MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip and make a big request from him. Can he work just as hard and with us to make sure that final step is taken so that a new Hillingdon Hospital is delivered, one that our residents deserve?
Yeah. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I provide unwavering support for the Leader's motion. These 7 commitments are nigh impossible without the support of national government. Our local residents will no doubt watch eagerly to see if the government's manifesto pledges of giving councils multi-year funding supplement and providing capacity and support, whatever one may think that to be, of course, are being responsibly met into real fiscal policy. Asylum seekers are not currently eligible for local authority housing and must be supported by the national government under the Housing Act number 6. That must remain. Dispersal grant funding to local authorities is not ring-fenced and can currently be used by authorities for other related purposes, intended to mitigate the impact on local services and provide wraparound support for asylum seekers. That must also remain. Full funding will ensure we do not compromise on resourcing local matters. It is reality that an ageing population with increasingly complex needs has increased demand for antisocial care. It's reality that there are substantial funding gaps. New Hampshire and Leeds councils face a £65.9 million shortfall. The reliance on regressive council tax to fund these services has exacerbated inequalities, particularly in more deprived areas. And that's why government funding is crucial to allow every resident to live with dignity and respect. Council, I am terrified of the Labour house building blitz. We must retain local power to override planning policies that disrupt our cherished green spaces. Green spaces are the lungs of our borough and preserve the character of our neighbourhoods, a duty we owe to future generations. Surely there are better creative solutions to housing requirements, such as improving workforce mobility and transport or modern co-living spaces, because aggressive building on our green belt is just the easy way out. Madam Mayor, this motion encapsulates the values and priorities of our residents, a testament to this side's continued commitment for responsible government. I urge this chamber to support this motion for not just preserving our existing successful council, but proper funding will build an even better future for England.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a matter of record that Hillingdon Labour has always put people before party, always have and always will. And we remain steadfast in our commitment to stand by our residents. However, Hillingdon Conservatives, on the other hand, clearly have not done so. Because if they had, they might not have needed to move this motion at all, considering they had their own government to work with for last 14 years. But looks like they did not have a creative light bulb moment then. And since we all love stories so much, let me share a story this motion reminds me of. There was this lord of a manor who lorded over a mansion that was crumbling on the inside. Over the years, as his riches ran out, the number of people working for him dwindled too, significantly affecting the mansion's upkeep. His wise neighbors could clearly see he needed help and suggested he seek help from the powers that be. But the Lord insisted he knew better and would never resort to picking up a begging bowl. Then came a day when he could no longer pretend, because a part of the mansion gave way and he was forced to seek shelter with his neighbors. Madam Mayor, it was not too long ago when in last November the Labour group brought a motion on lobbying the government for funds because the services were being affected. But the lord of the manor, my apologies, the leader of the council said, and I quote, "The opposition are fixated on cuts and their only response is to beg for more funding. Hillingdon Conservatives are focused on making savings and making efficient and better services and had since 2010-11 banked over 159 million in savings. I wonder what has changed for the so-called money-savvy, patting on their own back Hillingdon Conservatives. Surely it is the likelihood of bankruptcy staring them in the face. Or why the sudden change of heart? Why the begging bowl out now? Thank you."
Councillor Gardner. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak to try to bring some clarity to this motion. For 14 long years, our country has had a Conservative government, and for some of those years, the Conservative Prime Minister has been our local MP. Surely this unique position must have allowed our considerable influence with the then Prime Minister to deliver on at least some of the 7 points listed within this motion. So let's see how we did. Point 1, did we achieve full funding to support asylum seekers in consequence to us being a port of entry? No. Point 2, did the government grant funding cover our social care costs? No. Point 3, did we receive assurances that our 26 million cent deficit would continue to be ring-fenced? No. Point 4, did the Conservative government change laws so it could have vetoed ULEZ? No. Did we protect our own green belt by not building on it or on our metropolitan open land? No, we built on both. Point 6, did we stop the government from pursuing the third runway at Heathrow? No. Point 7, did the Conservative government fund local government adequately so our council tax did not increase? No. So the motion before us is asking the new Labour government to deliver on these 7 points when our Conservative administration failed to persuade its own government to do so over 14 long years. Words fail me, Madam Mayor. So let me get this straight. This Conservative administration is asking Labour to fund and approve its 7-point plan when its own government either wouldn't or couldn't. Unfortunately, our country now has been left with a financial cupboard completely bare, emptied by sheer financial incompetence by the now dearly departed Conservative government. So it's an Oliver Twist motion, begging bowl out, asking Labour to deliver on this council's 7-point plan when its own government said no. I always knew deep down that this Conservative administration would look to Labour when its own party failed to deliver, and by this motion I've been proved right. Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and what an interesting speech to follow. But can I start by congratulating Councillor Batten on an excellent maiden speech. Thank you for calling me. This is a wide-ranging motion which reaffirms our Hillingdon position on working positively and constructively with government, whoever that may be. And my remarks will focus on the removal of the threat of a third runway at Heathrow and its expansion. On this side, we've never shied away from taking tough decisions and have always stood up to government on this issue, whatever the political stripes. So we always do what residents are right. So what are the facts on expansion? Heathrow is already the biggest single source of carbon emissions in the UK, and expansion will add an extra 8 to 9 megatons of CO2. The carbon abatement cost of Heathrow is now doubled to 200 billion, and it's unclear the cost to the taxpayer of the road and rail infrastructure, which estimates between 5 and 10 billion, of only which 1 million Heathrow have committed to, and the expansion would see over 260,000 flights each year, almost 700 a day. None of this fits with this council's climate action plan. Last week, when writing for the Evening Standard, Rachel Reeves said that Labour will review all national policy statements within its first year in office. I think the simplest thing to do is for the government to withdraw the outdated airports national policy statement and begin a fresh approach on aviation policy, one that takes into account our environmental commitments and ends the blight for so many of our residents in the south of the borough. I am regularly saddened to hear residents close to the airport facing issues around planning, selling their homes, getting mortgages, and frankly the years of stress of uncertainty brings. And we also know that Heathrow are likely to seek additional flights based on their current two-runway airport. That is totally unacceptable. More noise and pollution for our residents cannot be permitted, and I hope for the sake of our residents that this government doesn't allow that to proceed. The cross-party alliance in Hillingdon has always been something I've been incredibly proud of. But in recent years, I'm a little bit concerned that's under threat. It's insanely frustrating to have a member of this council who actively boasts on their members of Register's interest to be a back Heathrow activist. And I really hope that all 3 of their MPs will not sit on the fence. Take the easy way out, because we know what the national parties have said on this, future proposals for Heathrow Airport expansion against certain tests. Well, the only test that matters is the one the residents of this borough have delivered time and time again when they have said no. And what has held this coalition together is a firm line, not based on the rosettes that we wear, but what is right for Hillingdon, and the ability of others to tell their friends when they are wrong. So it's clear, Madam Mayor, that when the evidence is truly assessed, the solution can never be to expand Heathrow. Heathrow is big enough. It needs to be better, not bigger, and that is our message to this government and to those in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For 14 long years, the Conservative government has been in power. And the Prime Minister, who was the local MP for Hillingdon, did nothing to action the points proposed in this motion. But I would like to say a few words on point 6. On the 26th of June 2018, a debate took place in the House of Commons where there was a vote on the third runway. MP voted for the expansion of Heathrow Airport. The vote was 415 to 119 votes. The same day, Boris Johnson, the then Foreign Secretary, flew out so that he can avoid supporting the pledge he made to the residents in Hillingdon. His words were, "They will have to get a bulldozer to remove him." Where was he when he was called to account? He was nowhere around to respond. But not only that, he let down the residents in Hillingdon and Heathrow villages, where there is a blight hanging over the community because of Heathrow expansion. Residents are unable to sell their properties, and what did your government did when they were in power? Silt. And now you are asking the new government to do what your party did not care to do for our community and residents when they were in government. In December of 2020, the Supreme Court, which is the uppermost court of appeal, overturned the court's appeal early decision to block the third runaway plan. It was therefore seemed unlikely that simple amending the national aviation policy would be sufficient to help our residents. More needs to be done. Instead, the priority should be to negotiate with Heathrow on their interim property hardship fund, which has blighted the village, prevent residents from successfully selling their property and being able to acquire a mortgage. This should be the priority. Thank you.
Councillor Colleen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In case anyone missed it, the election campaign is over and Labour won a historic landslide victory. So this sort of electioneering motion has really had its day. What we have here is a list of things that the current Conservative administration failed to deliver using their position and influence with their own government, including a local MP who also happened to be the Prime Minister. So it's not only the national Conservative government that has a catalogue of failures over the last 14 years, but Hillingdon Conservatives do too. Let's face it, they even failed to get a fish and chip shop in Uxbridge town centre, and when one was proposed, they voted against it. Madam Mayor, you really could not make this up. This motion contains no action apart from an implied lobbying of the Labour government on issues the Conservative government failed to deliver, and from a leader of the council who once declared in this very chamber they don't lobby. Well, Madam Mayor, perhaps if they had lobbied their own government and used their influence with the former Prime Minister, some of these issues may have been dealt with. Had we brought this motion to full council a few months ago, the Conservative group would have rubbished it and either amended it to somehow blame the Mayor of London for the Conservative government's failings, or they would have voted it down. So, Madam Mayor, it will not surprise you that we will not be supporting this motion, although we do agree with the motherhood and apple pie of the list of wants. It's just a pity that after 14 long Conservative years, the Conservative Council has had so little success with any of them. I would, however, like to take the opportunity to use my speech to reaffirm Hillingdon Labour Group's opposition to any further outward expansion of Heathrow Airport and to work cross-party on the issue of planning blight that the residents in the villages have suffered with for far too long. We won't sit on the fence like Boris Johnson did. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I think following that, I should start by saying that I undoubtedly blame the Mayor of London. Whatever it is, I blame him. But as the leader said earlier, this motion is, in my opinion, largely non-political. It deals with the issues that affects all our residents. And as a number of people have spoken tonight about the hospital and the airport and so on and so forth, these are issues that affect all our residents. It is worth recording also, of course, that the hospital is going ahead because of the former member for Uxbridge in his tenure as Prime Minister, who came down here and promised us that the hospital will go ahead and has made it happen. So let's be clear about why the hospital is going ahead. It is encouraging to see that that is still the case. Residents, as I said, this is issues that affect all our residents, regardless of political persuasion, from the north of the borough to the south. We are keen to work with this government, this new government, as we did with the last government. The question is, are they keen to work with us, and only time will tell, and are the local Labour Party keen to join us in that quest? We have heard a parable from Councillor Core tonight, but what we really need isn't a parable, but action on behalf of our residents. Madam Mayor, the motion speaks for itself. Only time will tell who really represents and speaks for the residents of Hillingdon. I second this motion.
Councillor Edwards. We'll have a vote. Those in favour of the motion? Those against? Those against? No? Okay. Carried. Yeah. Motion 8.2 from Councillor Punja, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to raise this motion on additional HMO licensing today. This motion is in response to the numerous issues from antisocial behaviour to poor housing conditions that we as ward councillors are facing with unlicensed HMOs of smaller properties and the negative impacts on our communities. In Councillor Cawthorne's own words, when I, Councillor Cawthorne that is, was a Cabinet Member for Social Services, Health and Housing, a report to Cabinet in 2015 resolved to renew the existing additional licensing scheme for smaller HMOs for 5 years, covering the 13 wards south of the A40 highway, as that was where it was justified. It stated the benefits to be safer, healthier living conditions for residents of HMOs, improved management standards in HMOs, reduced negative impact on the neighbourhood environment from poorly managed HMOs, and continuing robust enforcement of rogue landlords. In fact, all the reasons why I brought this motion to this council chamber today. In 2015, we had 153 mandatory licensed HMOs with an estimated increase to 212 and 362 additional licensed HMOs with an estimated increase to 577. By December 2021, there were 650 HMOs licensed in Hillingdon. The additional licensing scheme had sadly lapsed and there were no further statistics, except for an estimate that the number of HMOs requiring mandatory licensing were likely to be doubled. Yet, by September 2023, there were only 729 HMOs licensed in the borough. The impact of this scheme lapsing is exactly what the 2015 report said would happen if the renewal was not approved then. A loss in enforcement powers, reducing the council's ability to deal with rogue landlords, and poor management within our HMO stock, and a loss of licensing fee income, which both contributes towards the budgetary cost of the HMO team and enables it to generate income on a broadly cost recovery basis. Moreover, the benefits of continuing the scheme have been compromised severely, and only implementing an additional licensing scheme can begin to address this. As per the HMO report to Environment, Housing and Regeneration Select Committee in January 2022, which outlined the priority to identify additional HMO that required licensing, Madam Mayor, we welcome the amendment to the original motion and I thank this council for taking this matter seriously and putting the legal requirements into action for the implementation of additional licensing where justified. Thank you.
Is that seconded by Councillor Abbey?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I second the motion. The motion before you today addresses the concerns of our residents arising from unlicensed HMOs, uninhabitable living conditions to exploitative landlords. Due to the inadequate enforcement, inspections and management, landlords are getting away with placing vulnerable residents in deplorable conditions. This motion aims to reinforce the basic standards for the HMO licensing in the London Borough of Hillingdon. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I moved the amendment that is in my name on the order paper, and I think the member opposite has already indicated it is regarded as friendly, which was its intention. To move beyond the current mandatory licensing scheme requires evidence consultation and, depending on the size of the scheme, Secretary of State approval. And to quote the 2004 Housing Act, it requires an additional licensing scheme to be considered, but it must take into consideration that significant proportions of HMOs of that description in the area are being ineffectively managed and are causing one or more problems for either those occupying the HMOs or the public. We must take reasonable steps to consult those who are likely to be affected, and we must ensure that the designation is consistent with overall housing strategy and adopt a coordinated approach in dealing with homelessness, empty homes and social behaviour affecting the private rented sector. Licensing, of course, mainly impacts the internal state and safety of a property and not necessarily its impact on the neighbourhood. If a property meets the licensable standard, regardless of how many others there are on the road, it will get a licence. We do have other potential powers at our disposal, and in particular I referred in my earlier answer to the Article 4 we already have in place, which removes permitted development rights for smaller HMOs. And the issue with these, as well as any that may occur within the property, is the effect they can have on the area as a whole. I have already, in fact, asked my officers to investigate whether we have the evidence to extend our Article 4 designation further. Members will be aware, of course, that this is subject to a 12-month notice period and does require the approval of the Secretary of State. The report to Cabinet will cover both the licensing and planning considerations of such a move. I move the amendment.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the amendment and reserve my right to speak to the end, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification of members and members of the public watching, we're now discussing the amendment as set out in italics on the bottom of page 6, and I believe Councillor Sweeting wants to speak.
Councillor Sweeting, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The amendment mentions the importance of evidence. So before we move forward on this very important issue, it is necessary to have accurate data on existing HMOs in our borough and where they are located. In this way, analysis could be undertaken to establish density of HMOs in particular wards. In response to a recent member's inquiry, the current list of HMOs by ward was provided, which contained a significant number of errors. I know that my own ward of West Drayton is the second most populated ward, but I didn't realise that as far as the council's audit showed, the Kingdom of West Drayton extended into roads in Heathrow Villages, Useley, Colham, Cowley, Yedding, and also it is still using the old ward names. So please, accurate data is the first vital step. Thank you.
Councillor Money.
Thank you. Many of you know that I represent Heathrow Villages. We have been fighting alongside the residents to help implement an Article 4 directive mentioned by the councillors opposite, which we first raised as early as 2015. Currently, the only place in Hillingdon that this is enforced is rightly around Brunel University to protect the housing conditions of university students as well as the local area. But it's long overdue in Heathrow villages. We are being blighted by the airport, Heathrow. We've got a loss of community and it's very much needed. This motion is on additional HMO licensing is a small start towards that process. A resident recently contacted us about properties that are being sold on the open market. Not on the open market, but instead sold privately to cash buying investment companies. In a particular example, just last week, an estate agent is promising completion in a 4 to 6 week lead time to an investment company. It's a quick sale promised at a reduced price, with the incentive being that it's going to be sold to cash buyers. Because the area is blighted, we're not able to get mortgages in the area or remortgages. This is the loss of a vital 3-bed house in a small village. HMOs have many negative impacts on the community that cannot be overlooked. Strained infrastructure, disrupted community cohesion, increased noise and antisocial behaviour, overcrowding, safety concerns, as well as declining property standards for vulnerable and exploited residents, which are significant issues that need to be addressed. It is vital for local authorities, landlords and residents to work together to ensure that HMOs are licensed and managed responsibly and in the interest of the broader community to be protected, and not just for landlords. I support this amended motion that it will bring some kind of deterrent to landlords and the improvement of lives to the residents and the communities. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Sorry.
Let me just say that...
Sorry, are there any other speakers?
My apologies.
Councillor Cole, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank Councillor Punja for moving this motion and the administration for this friendly amendment. According to a report published in The Guardian, nearly 160,000 people are living in hidden, often overcrowded and sometimes dangerous bedsit style accommodations across England. Intelligence compiled by council suggests there are almost 32,000 unlicensed large houses in multiple occupation, and these are believed to be home to at least over 150,000 tenants who are often drawn by cheaper rents amid the cost of living crisis. Based on local authority statistics submitted to the government between 2011 and 2022, the estimated number of large hidden bedsits, those that accommodate more than 5 unrelated people sharing bathrooms and kitchens, has increased by 46% in the past 10 years in England. There is no oversight of occupancy rates, fire safety measures or other living conditions in unlicensed shared properties. Large HMOs require a license in England, but smaller ones only require a license in some parts of the country. The most recent estimates suggest there are more than 367,000 smaller bedsits in England with a population of at least 1 million. It is important that Hillingdon gets to grips with the issue, and as Councillor Sweeting said, the first step in the right direction would be to update and audit the available data in accordance with the new ward boundaries. This motion is clearly non-political, and I'm glad that, well, it's quite rare, but we agree on it on both sides. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Edwards, sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And it is very nice to hear that harmony has broken out across this chamber. And it will show what we can do when we work positively together, because you will be able, colleagues from the opposition, to bring evidence to bear that will substantiate any additional extension of regulation that will be required. I've given my commitment, and I have told my team that we need to do more around supporting people in private rented accommodation. This isn't limited just to the issue of HMOs. And whilst we've talked about the negative side of HMOs, they are a crucial part of the actual supply of housing now to young people, particularly young professional people who are trying to establish themselves in London but cannot afford housing. But it is right that we have the proper regulation of the property. It is a complex world. There is no simple answer to this, and it is something that we will look at in great detail. We wish to use the planning laws to the best of our ability because that will control density. We want to look at implementing the licensing, but I am mindful of the fact that with small HMOs, the cost of that licence will immediately be passed through to the tenant, and that is going to represent a cost to them. And so we have to make sure that it is right and appropriate. And also, I don't wish to divide this borough into the poor south where we have this regulation and the rich north where we do not. It is important that we try and have a standard approach across our borough to the supervision of our private rented accommodation. As a father living at home with his now 30-something-year-old daughter, because they cannot afford accommodation in this borough, you know that I have skin in the game. I am committed to make sure that we have good standards of private accommodation across this borough, and I welcome the motion that was brought and our ability to move this forward with regards to licensing or potentially planning extension. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you. Thank you across this chamber because for many of us, it's creeping northwards. We've got companies now buying properties rather than individuals buying properties. It's not just about being at south of the borough, it is going across the whole of the borough. My neighbours next door to me are now doing exactly the same thing. So I think this is an important issue. I know that this council, previous administrations had put in additional licensing. You can see the benefits of those additional licensing that was put in there. The problems haven't changed, they've just exacerbated with the cost of living crisis, and it would be, we have to acknowledge that and we have to actually address those issues. So I thank this chamber for agreeing to this motion.
Councillor Lavery? No? Vote in favour of the motion. Sorry, the amendment, beg your pardon. Any against?
Madam Mayor, that is carried. That becomes the substantive motion which is set out at the bottom of page 6 and the top of page 7 on the order of business, which just needs formal agreement.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Right. Right. That's the end of the meeting. Our meeting is now closed.